Hello, this is EJK, and this particular video is going to be about MMA's recent run at Home Story Cup 12, and it's going to be a video on hallmarks of expert play, and in this case the player is MMA. I should start the game while I talk. Oh, and let me adjust this so it's not too loud. Okay, so hallmarks of expert play, and we're going to be looking at what makes MMA, or I should say what made MMA a great player. And essentially, what made him a great player was his very, very well thought out game plans, his unit positioning, and being an all-round solid player. He didn't have any fundamental flaws in his macro, his micro, or his multitasking. I wouldn't call him exceptional at any of them, but I wouldn't call him bad by any means at any of them. So a very fundamentally well-rounded macro player with exceptional unit positioning with his medevacs and his game plans. As we see in this game in particular, MMA is going for a very cheesy build. However, this game lasts for 24 minutes. The reason why I picked this game first is to illustrate MMA's very adaptable approach to the game. So what I mean by that is in this particular game, he broke down his game plan in steps. So his first step, the first part of his game plan, was to apply pressure with this 3-Rex Reaper build on Orbital Shipyard, which is a pretty good map for Reapers. Snute's response is pretty solid. He makes a Roach Ling and immediately puts guys back on gas as soon as he identifies that this is happening. And as soon as the Roaches are out, the Reaper harass is essentially shut down. And Snute does a very good job at defending this as well. So it's a good thing that MMA has a backup plan, because the first part of the plan didn't work. But he streamlines the 3-Rex Reaper pressure into the next phase of his plan, which is essentially to play a macro game from here. We see him taking his command center. He's going to add a second command center, so he's going for a 3cc build, all whilst applying pressure to the Zerg player. What he has prevented Snute from doing with this Reaper pressure, although he hasn't outright killed Snute, the advantages he has obtained is he has a wealth of scouting information, constantly being able to poke on this side of the map and see what Snute has. He forced Snute to get Roaches and to make a lot of Zerglings, a lot of units. So Snute just now caught up in the drone count, but this 3-Rex Reaper pressure really prevented him from utilizing his second base and saturating it up to where he wanted to as fast as possible. And now, another benefit of having these Reapers out is that they are preventing Snute from taking a third base. So while MMA is he's slowly going to be catching up in economy with his third command center. When that starts producing SCVs and dropping the mules, his income's going to skyrocket, because a Terran with mules on equal basis as a Zerg player will outmine the Zerg player. And the way that Zerg players counter that is by taking a faster third base and getting that saturated to stay quote-unquote even in economy terms. And in this case, we see Snute doesn't really have the option of being able to take his third base right now. He made so many units early on, and now he's using them defensively to drone up both of his bases. So he's reached full saturation on both of his bases, but he was not able to take a third base, so he cannot continue droning up at the point of the game where, as a Zerg player, you'd want to be taking your third base right now. And now with the Ravagers having finished morphed, there's 6 range, outranges the Reaper range of 5. You can actually kite Reapers versus Roaches if you are really on top of your micro. I've done it before. It's very interesting because Reaper shots don't do any damage to Roaches, but you can every little bit counts. So MMA is now taking his third base at around the same time that Snute is taking his third base. So although his initial part of his build, the 3 racks Reaper pressures, failed, if we take a look at what's going on, let's wait until the upgrades finish. At this part of the game, so after, I would say, a fairly... The 3 racks Reaper opening did a lot of indirect damage, a lot more than it did direct damage. So, although Snute did not take much damage from it, like it appears in the game, he still took a lot of indirect damage, and we're going to be taking a look at that right now. It's a replay, so we have all these awesome unit counters. So, first thing to note, most importantly, is MMA is ahead in income. He has those 3 mules. He also is ahead in SCVs. But I don't think that really matters, being ahead in only 1. He has delayed his starport. His starport is now just finishing. He got 2 reactors and a tech lab on all of his barracks before he started his factory. So a very safe way of being able to take that 3rd command center. So MMA has a very sizable army, and he's just in a very good spot to accelerate into the later stages of the game. And being a macro player, MMA is all about getting into the later parts of the game. The next phase, I guess I would call this the next phase. This is kind of like part 1 of phase 2, is securing the 3rd base and starting to do his drop stuff and to slowly deny Snute's economy for taking a 4th base. So we see here just a little bit of poking going on. There's no banelings, so you can poke on creep like this. And MMA actually has a very scary army, and he's doing very decently trading out. So what this forces Snute to do is it forces him to replenish his army, even if the trade isn't going as well as he'd like. Well, it is. It's going very well, actually, for MMA. The reasoning behind it going very well is because Snute's droning was, I guess, off. These fungals end up saving him, by the way. Which is alright, because unexpected things like this happen in the game. What was I saying? I get off on so many tangents. Oh yeah, so the reason why MMA was able to do all that damage was because Snute had just finished saturating his 3rd base. Let's go back a little bit so I can just illustrate my point, because we can just X through this super fast. Love having a replay. So Snute needs to drone up so that he can get back ahead in economy. He's very far behind because his 3rd base was denied for such a long time because of the initial Reaper harass. So that Reaper harass wasn't meant to do economical damage in the sense of killing drones, killing units. Well, it did kill some units. It was meant to do economic damage by preventing Snute from being able to efficiently drone up to get the economy that he wanted to. So Snute's now droning up at probably the worst possible time when there's an army right outside of his doorstep. And he's continuing to drone because he needs to catch up in economy, or he's forced to make units. And sure, he might be able to hold this, but then he wouldn't have had his 3rd saturated. So in a way, it was very important for Snute to drone up his 3rd base to get back into the game, or to try to do an all-in of sort and end the game with a slightly higher army count, which wouldn't have gone so well because of how defensively MMA was playing. He rushed out his 3 barracks add-ons, and he doesn't. I believe he has his ebays now. He is 1-1, but he did delay his ebays slightly as well. So his emphasis was to get as many units as possible. So an all-in has a lower percentage to work. So these fungals saving the day. Wow, Infestor with 6 kills. That's amazing because it only used one. It only had enough energy for 1 fungal. So now that that push kind of failed, it kind of didn't. It forced out a lot of units. MMA got a couple of drones that Snute has to replenish, and MMA is in a great spot economically. And his 4th base is starting as well. Snute's 4th base is kind of starting, but it's going to be very difficult to get that 4th base up and running. And I guess another advantage that the Reaper pressure did was not only did it prevent Snute from taking the 3rd base, but it also prevented him from laying these creep tumors at his 3rd base as well. So we see on the map that Snute has very poor creep spread right now. It's barely outside of his 3rd base, and this is what's making the 4th base very easy for MMA to push up into like this. And there's no buffer room for the creep, for in between the base and the army. They're fighting right at the doorstep, which is not where Snute wants to be. So the next phase of the game is going to be all about doing this just very large, oh, I cannot ping, wow, this very large push all the way from the 3rd base and to go all the way to the 4th base of Snute. Actually, it doesn't even have to be the 4th base. It's just the objective is to deny this base. That is MMA's next game plan on this map. Because the way it works is if you deny this base, or if you at least occupy this area, you prevent the Zerg player from taking the very close 5th, the very close 6th base. And so the Zerg player is pretty much forced to take the 5th base here if he so chooses to expand and continue playing a macro game, which Snute wants to do. So it's very smart planning by MMA to decide to push this way to deny these bases and force Snute to take a very unfavorable 5th base. So that's like the next phase of the game that's going on here. So blah 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 blah, a bunch of pushing happens. We see on the minimap MMA is establishing his 4th base, the aggressive 4th base, so that his 4th base is fairly well defended because of this reinforcement line coming across the minimap, because his army is right smack dab in the middle between what's going on. So Snute cannot very easily get to this 4th base location and harass it. More pushing going on. Snute needing to take a 4th base because he is running out of money. Takes it over here. And so and he's also only on 54 drones as well, which is a very, very low drone count for him. He's still winning the fights. I think he has a superior army. Oh crap, the drop. He has a superior army, however, the things that MMA does prevents Snute from utilizing the advantage of having that superior army. So although MMA is by no means trading cost efficiently, it's fairly even, he is winning the game economically. He has this fresh 4th base. Snute's 4th base is barely running. His 3rd base isn't even fully saturated. No, MMA's isn't either. That's weird. And Snute's 4th base is now going down, whereas MMA's 4th base is already up. So as long as MMA trades relatively evenly, he's going to win because Snute won't be able to replenish these units. So another hallmark of expert play is the usage of the medevacs. Now, this seems like a kind of a random medevac just out on this side of the map. But what it does is it forces Snute to deal. It forces Snute to react to this medevac. Because if you don't react to it, you'll start to lose a lot of stuff. So we see Snute's reaction here shortly. He sends his reinforcements to deal with this drop. And sure, there's just a couple units to clean it up. But what this does is it prevents him from... Does he use the... Oh, he does use the larva. Wait. Oh, Snute has... Oh my gosh. Okay, Snute has his whole army on one hotkey, and he uses the larva method as well. So all of his eggs go straight... Okay, so what happened... So this actually does a lot more damage than MMA intended because of how Snute plays this game. So we see here... okay, there it is. So the rally for these roaches is kind of just since the eggs are in his army. Yep, since the eggs are in his army, the roaches are going to be rallied towards the fight. So having to deal with this drop with your reinforcements means that you have to rally your entire army, like all of these units coming to deal with the drop, which coincidentally can just leave because there's no mutalisks. So Snute's entire army, oh my god, including the queens, is pulled back to deal with this drop. So any counterattack that Snute could possibly do, even if he had taken a favorable engagement, trying to deal with this drop with his entire army, this is a very, very large overcommitment. 4 queens and his whole army to deal with the drop, which isn't even dealt with either, by the way, because he can just pick up and be annoying. But what this does is it forces Snute to deal with it, and Snute is dealing with it rather inefficiently, having 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 roaches. The queens aren't injecting at all. That's a lot of army and a lot of army production that's being used to deal with a single medevac with 6 marines in it. So with 8 supply, Snute is using 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 supply to deal with the drop. And what that does is it makes Snute's army much, much smaller than it needs to be, or smaller than he would like it. So this could be a better fight for Snute if he had his entire army, if he had a bunch of larvae to rally across the map, make units, but his economy is in shatters, so he can't actually rally across the map. But that one drop gave MMA a lot of momentum in this game, and now Snute is now trying to... He feels safe. The drop has been dealt with, I believe. Yes, I don't see it on the minimap. The drop has been dealt with. Snute feels safe, and now he's trying to push out. However, MMA's tanks are already in position. His army is actually all ready. And if we take a look at Snute pushing out now compared to Snute pushing out like when he first won the fight, and when he still had a better economy, like, because every second he doesn't push out, MMA's 4th base is chugging along, giving him a lot more money to spend. Wait, I don't think this is not it. The very, very first fight. Okay, so like pushing here and trying to kill the 4th base as opposed to when Snute did push. So Snute takes a fairly good engagement over here. He's able to clean up MMA's army. And he's pushing MMA's army back. Snute has the army lead. He has a much larger army. MMA's units are not together. His 4th base is essentially undefended at this moment in time. And what this single drop does, where's the drop? Here's the drop, is it buys MMA minutes, not even like a half a minute or a minute, full minutes. So Snute could have potentially pushed, killed some SCVs, possibly even taken down the planetary fortress, or at least forced MMA on the defensive. But instead, his army is dealing with the drop, and then they take another big engagement, which I guess Snute has to back up. No, he doesn't. So he takes another good engagement, but now MMA's fourth base has been up and running. Snute's production is starting to hit rock bottom because his mineral or his income is just not there. And so it was about 12:20 that Snute could have pushed out, but now he's finally pushing out almost 2 minutes later, and this is going absolutely nowhere. MMA goes back to doing pushing, and this is just kind of like a back and forth, many small micro engages. So MMA's game plan is to keep pushing, to keep trying to take the fourth base down, and he eventually gets it. There we go. He even had a sensor tower over here to solidify this half of the map. Nothing passes through this without MMA knowing. The Eye of Sauron. And so, now that the fourth base is gone, Snute hasn't left the game yet. MMA is like, okay, Snute, I killed your fourth base, you have no economy left. Snute still has a decent-sized army. He is maxed, because Roaches are very inefficient in supply, as well as Ravagers. Ravagers are actually 3 supply. So, this is the third part of MMA's game plan. So, it's changed from opening up with 3 Rex Reapers to pushing Snute's fourth base to now dealing with the other base. And so, we see this game kind of... MMA takes some not so great fungals, but he's still trading out relatively evenly, and being a base, having been a base up for a long time, gives him a lot of leeway in the micro area and what kind of engagements he needs to take to be able to win. He's actually up at full base still. So now we see MMA cycling across to the other side of the map. Now this side has been secured with the sensor tower, which is great. And so now we see MMA's entire army starting to move across to start to deal with this base over here. And MMA has not been very drop heavy, because he's been very focused on pushing towards Snute's bases. Now we see a single drop going off while MMA is in a sieged up position, kind of in a stale position. He's in a static position, so it's not very easily movable. But where he does get his mobility is from the drops. Snute having to take this base, that is cringeworthy for any Zerg player or Terran. Well, for any Zerg player, for any Terran player, that's great for them. But having to take that base because you simply cannot defend this base and this base at the same time means Snute is in a very bad position. And this drop again, Snute has to bring a very large chunk of his army, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. Oh wait, a couple of them are Ravagers. So it's about 30 supply to deal with the single medevac. So it's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 supply. Well, and there's this other medevac over here as well. So, as MMA is pushing on this side of the map, he's starting to add on the pressure with the medevacs, and he would have done drops sooner to this base, but he just didn't scout it early enough. He scouted it after Snute's base down here went down. He did a scan over here and saw it. So one of the advantages of the Zerg player expanding is they get more money for their army. one of the disadvantages is that it leaves them more vulnerable to drops. So as drops go on in a TvZ game, they become exponentially more powerful because the Zerg player doesn't have the mobility to deal with the drops as well if you don't get Mutalisks compared to the Terran player utilizing the drops. So that's why Snute ended up losing this base, and he ended up losing this base as well. Neither are bases that he really wants to lose. And we see MMA very calmly macroing up. He's now pushing out now that he's a bit about max, but in the meantime he was defensive, taking another base. He floated it over from his third, and he floated his main over here as well. But he is pushing on this side of the base, or on this side of the map now, and he is also expanding and defending these expansions with his main push as well, like he did on this side of the map. He's just doing it on this side of the map now. And we see a dropship over here preventing 4 roaches from being part of the fight, 8 supply. So really Snute's army, or Snute's supply here is really like it's just like -8 because these roaches are over here, and MMA just has a single medevac now, but that was 4 supply. So it's just a very good way, very supply efficient in making Snute's army smaller than it could actually be. Now, Snute ends up kind of just running out of economy. MMA's economy is booming at this point. He's managed to take the entire map while denying Snute's 4th base consistently. So like, although Snute has been mining from a 4th base for brief periods of time, MMA has taken essentially the entire map. So what that tells us is, well, Snute might have a 4th base. He might end up getting it too, because that's what he was working all game long to get. But MMA just has too much economy. Poor Snute. Now he's getting his ghosts in expectation of Ultra Tech or to deal with the Infestors. MMA's been eating some horrible fungals this whole game. Only reason why Snute's been kept in the game, I think. But GG is called, and that was I think this was a very great game of seeing the evolution of MMA's game plan, which started with the Reaper pressure to deny the 3rd, which went to the 4th, or where the 4th bases were, and MMA pushing Snute's 4th base location, denying these bases, and keeping his base safe as well, all with his army being in this area, this general area. And then, after this base has gone down, to rotate over on this side of the map and rinse and repeat and do the same thing. So his army was generally in this area. He took the bases that are around the area so that it's easy to defend with his main army, and he also pushed Snute's base as well. His army accomplishing multiple purposes, both the main army and the drops. This game. MMA just really has very solid gameplay, and he's able to get a lot of value out of the same units that you and I might use as well. Like if we go bio and make bio tank, we might not get the same amount of value out compared to his, because all of his units are essentially covering multiple purposes of his game plan, which makes his game plan infinitely stronger than other players. And that and the unit positioning of his army are the two exceptional things about MMA's play, very characteristic of him. Pol is slightly different because he uses his army in different ways. So he likes to split it up in half and have multiple medevacs to deal pressure on the map. whereas MMA only likes to drop one-ish medevac around at the same time. So this game, MMA is opening up with the Banshee to be a bit more defensive. He likes to mix up his builds. The opening of the builds isn't necessarily important as what it accomplishes for MMA's game plan. And his game plan is essentially the same on Orbital Shipyard. It's to push the 4th bases, take the bases to defend, or defend the bases with the push that's going on, and to help make the push more efficient, and to help deny bases by doing drops on all sides of the map, or actually on opposite sides of where you're pushing. So like MMA pushes here, he drops over here. MMA pushes here, he drops over here. These Banshees getting a lot of value. However, Nerchio has gone up to a very greedy 73 drones. He doesn't even need that many drones to saturate his 3rd base. I would say he's oversaturated even, and he overmade drones. He is going for a macro game, seeing the double upgrades. The melee attack means that he's going for Ultralisks. Oh, I should say that MMA opened up for a Banshee, or Cloak Banshee opener to be defensive. Oh, that was a really... oh, crap. I missed it. That was a really good point. They completely went by. So, the bunker. A little cool thing that MMA did. Oops, let's go on his vision. So, we followed the Reaper. La 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 la. See Zerglings. Oh no, oh no. Who cares? He doesn't see speed researching. And so, he knows that... he knows that Nerchio is not going to have any gas, and based on past games, Nerchio's gone for the early Roach Warren as well. So MMA builds a bunker at this location instead of, say, here or, say, here. And I like that move by MMA because it helps solidify this area, the 3rd base area, which he is going to eventually take because he's going for a 3 command center build. He's going for a 3 command center build. So having this area secured already is a great feeling for a Terran player, so that it's very easy to take your 3rd base, basically. So now we go through all the harass again. Dun, 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 dun. Double upgrades by Nerchio, the triple Ravager to defend against Liberators, and only 3 queens. I think he lost one to the Banshees to defend against the Banshees. Also, Nerchio's creep spread is pretty non-existent as well. The Banshees have done a good job at keeping that at bay. Now the standard 2 medevac drop coming in for MMA. This is very Heart of the Swarm-esque style. We saw this build a lot in Heart of the Swarm. I think Maru especially made it very popular. And Nerchio takes a slightly poor engagement there because of the damage that the Banshees took, or that the Banshees dealt, I should say, and because Nerchio overdroned as well, so he didn't have enough units right away to be able to break down the rocks and to defend against the drop fast enough. And even worse now, both of the Banshees are still alive. So again, MMA really showing his skill in keeping a build order, or like keeping a game plan, just covering multiple elements of a game plan. So like these Banshees, they not only do a lot of economic damage by canceling this 4th base, they killed a bunch of drones as well. They offer a second option to attack on the air. So not only are the 2 medevacs alive, ideally you could have all 16 of your Marines still there. So it presents an option where MMA can either do a straight up push with the 2 Banshees and the 16 Marine double medevac, or he can attack in 2 locations, which is what he's doing now. And the Banshees also prevented a lot of creep spread from going down, and really limited Nerchio's creep spread. We see this game as well. His creep spread's pretty non-existent. So all of that put MMA very, very far ahead in supply. Off of what seems like to be just a very standard opener as well. We see this fight going on, not really digging Nerchio's army. Not having any banelings means that these marines can really stay clumped up and deal maximum damage for as long as possible. Whereas before you had to pre-spread against the banelings. Nerchio, though, he's getting very, very fast Ultralisks. So his goal this game was to establish a booming economy and be able to get Ultralisks out ASAP and then crush his opponent's army. So his game plan's focused all around the Ultralisks. He even got melee upgrades, and I don't believe he got Roach speed. Oh, he did get Roach speed, but he only made very few Ravagers instead, so he really played greedy trying to cut units to get these Ultralisks, but MMA inadvertently hits a pre-Ultralisk timing by doing his regular push at Nerchio's 4th base and being able to take it out before the Ultralisks come. This used to be a pre-hive timing push back in Heart of the Swarm, and nothing about MMA's play has really changed other than the fact that he cycles in a couple units here and there. Like, you see a Liberator here and there, you see a lot less Widow Mines than in Heart of the Swarm, a couple more Siege Tanks. But for the most part, it's still very Heart of the Swarm-esque bio style that we see out of MMA. So now that the 4th base has died, one changed adaptation, I should say, that MMA makes during the game is, since the 4th base is dead, there's really no reason to take this 4th base, because when MMA took it against Snute, he left the 4th base, or he left his army over here in this area, which could defend the 4th base. Now, there's no reason to take the 4th base here, because MMA is no longer pushing here. His army's not there, so he ends up taking this as his 4th base instead. And he's also getting ready to pin back Nerchio as well. He has very large amount of units in position, and Nerchio is getting ready as well for the inadvertent double-pronged attack. But this is a slight difference that MMA is doing compared to the other games. So the scenario has changed where he's no longer trying to pin back small parts of Nerchio's army. He wants to pin back very large parts of Nerchio's army. And that's why we've seen the medevac count increase significantly. Ooh, I like that. Nice, a 3rd drop here. So not only splitting the army apart, but more importantly, MMA is just trading out his units. So the Ultralisks are out. In the Snute game, Snute never made it to Ultralisks or Hive Tech, I believe. So MMA's game plan is now to just kind of take a lot of micro skirmishes, because Ultralisks are slow, immobile units. Very slow. They will never be able to attack on the other side. And even if they do, these drops are all going to do enormous amounts of pressure. So Nerchio, already fed up with the fact that MMA keeps dropping him, is going for a very YOLO counterattack on the 4th base. But MMA is okay with that, because his drops are in position. They're doing a crazy amount of damage. And although Nerchio gets the 4th base and you get some fresh mules, blah 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 blah, MMA has been slowly trading out the drops, the supply and the drops for these ghosts, so that he has an anti-Ultralisk army. And essentially, Nerchio's attack, all it did was kill 10 SCVs and some mules. MMA's attack, it killed a hatchery, it killed many units, and many drones as well. So MMA, even though he had a significant portion of his army in medevacs, he was still able to defend at home and win the semi-base trade scenario in a convincing manner, so that Nerchio is forced to back up. We see these medevacs going out again. This time, though, it's more to just do small amounts of pressure and to still trade out the armies for more ghosts, which we see, oh my gosh, 17 ghosts MMA getting in response to the Ultralists. And also, to punish these kinds of attacks, it basically prevents Nerchio from being aggressive, because then the drops come and they start to punish him. MMA was looking for the base over there, 5th base for Nerchio to take, but nope, GG is called. Small changes that MMA made to his play is that since Nerchio was committing to a very speedling heavy style with double melee upgrades, and he scouted that, MMA's response is to stop making the siege tanks and to instead make a bunch of barracks, oh my gosh, 13, and start spamming ghost production and taking a 4th base to create an anti-hive army, because ghosts do counter Ultralists and Broodlords at the same time, which is pretty cool. So the next game we're going to take a look at, there's just 2 more games here, and I know it's going to be a pretty long VOD, but I'll have it labeled for each game. I'm just going to clump it all together into one big VOD. So there's Firecake versus MMA and Nerchio versus MMA. We're going to take a look at this game first. This game really highlights the strength of MMA's unit positioning and how he just continuously is able to punish Nerchio's aggression. Nerchio's a very aggressive European Zerg player, and on a map like Central Protocol, it would seem to favor a player like him. It is cross positions though, so aggression will not be as fast. It'll come later in the game because you can bounce between this area and this area relatively fast with this pathway in between. Dun, 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 dun. So both players just macroing up, pretty normal. Dun, 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 dun. Nice, nice, nice. Denying the Overlord Scout, very important. He does get it too, so that was good. That was a good read by MMA, knowing that in these positions the Overlord would come in this area and that single Marine can snipe it. Lings being Lings, very annoying. Showing that he doesn't have speed though. That's a big tell that Nerchio's going Roaches. Although this is Nerchio's stylistic choice, but not having speed at the 3:30 minute mark, slow Zerglings, no speed, pretty much means that you're going Roaches. And that's pretty much a dead tell that these Roaches are coming out. MMA knows that. So what this ends up being is a dedicated Roach Ravager attack, or pressure I should say, with a single Ravager aimed at trying to kill a bunker and deliver economic damage by killing SCVs. However, it doesn't do as much damage as Nerchio would like. Banshee comes out, this pressure is stopped, and he killed 8 SCVs, but he's now only ahead, and MMA enjoyed an economic advantage before the attack occurred, so I would say that the attack went in favor of MMA, actually, and Nerchio didn't get as much damage done as he would have liked. So MMA going for the Cloak Banshee again. Very solid build to do. Overall, the Banshees still are powerful. They have not lost their usefulness, just their popularity. Very nice stuff. Picking off whatever he can. And it's damage like this is like Nerchio has queens, he has a spore in each mineral line, and he's still taking damage. That's how good Banshees are. You're always going to be able to find a little bit of damage. We see a bunch more drones go down, even though there's a Spore Crawler. And what are you going to do? Make a second Spore Crawler and over-defend against this? Well, you're still taking damage pretty indirectly. When we see MMA seize the Roach Warren, start researching speed. And Nerchio is going for a plus attack air. this time rather than the melee. And what he ends up doing is a very powerful 3-base timing push that kind of catches MMA off guard. And so a lot of workers have been killed on either side. Game is relatively even. I would say that MMA is slightly ahead though because of his general army composition as opposed to Nerchio. Since Nerchio's hitting or trying to hit a sick timing attack, having to replenish those drones hurts him a bit more than it hurts MMA to replenish SCVs, because MMA is still producing units at the same time. So we see this very sick timing by Nerchio hit. Completely wipes out MMA's third base. He is forced to retreat home to be able to stand a chance at defending against this very scary attack. And Nerchio does a very good job trying to... He makes the mistake of going in here, though, instead of trying to attack the third and just whittle it down. He gets very overconfident, ends up not taking too good of a trade, and having to back up, wastes some more corrosive bile on that Viking when he should have been using it to kill the orbital. So what we see happening here is MMA has a very distinct game plan, whereas Nerchio's game plan is a little bit more freestyle. He has a powerful timing that he hit with Roaches and Ravagers off of 3 bases to deny MMA's third base, but he doesn't have a follow-up afterwards. We saw him try to kill MMA there, it didn't work. Now MMA has secured his third base again, and he's in an okay spot. MMA, on the other hand, was simply waiting for a 2-2 timing to be able to move across the map and try to deny one of Nerchio's bases. And already being in defensive positioning because he wasn't going to move out before 2-2, MMA is able to defend that push relatively well. So we see here this drop being sent out where MMA is getting ready for his 2-2 timing, so this drop's lining up with the 2-2 timing. So he wanted to push and then push with his army, but instead the small adjustment that is being made here is that MMA is defending with his army, still engaging Nerchio, but defending with his army and still doing the drop. And so although he's taken some pretty sick damage on his production, this single drop here pretty much does the same damage that, what, like 50, 60 supply of roaches do. So Nerchio should be like focusing down the third base. Instead he's trying to go for a fight, which I think is a very not good decision to do. I mean, his army is pretty good. Can't blame him for trying to take a fight. But it just shows that he has a lot less discipline, like leaving that third base mining that extra time and not trying to target it down fast enough. He could have easily gotten it if he tried to focus it more. Wow, that also failed. But we see this drop here, pretty much doing the same thing that this entire army is doing for Nerchio. So Nerchio is being very aggressive, MMA is being very defensive with his main army, and he's attacking with his drop. And what does Nerchio have at home to defend it? Well, before this drop came, Nerchio's rally point was not at his third base. It was way over here. So he was doing an aggressive rally. So different from Snute's inject or adding the larva to his hotkey method. But it still illustrates that Nerchio is being aggressive. He wants his units to reinforce the fight. They're being slowly trickled in. And as a result, there is no defense at his third base. And this entire drop is able to pick off a third base, which is a pretty big deal, that this drop is able to do as much damage as the army does. And so although Nerchio was able to stop the third, still trade out a bit of army relatively decently, MMA's single drop is doing a ton of damage. Liberator is a nice addition, especially on this map, on like these bases. Very easy to camp a Liberator there. Nerchio trying to do a little bit more damage. MMA is able to reposition his army, able to shoo away Nerchio's army, kind of reestablish his third base. But at the same, more importantly, Nerchio is only on 2 bases as well. So MMA, although his third base is not going down, Nerchio does not have a third base either. So Nerchio is in the lead. And we see here, this game has gotten kind of wonky, but MMA is, so like how MMA ends up dealing with this Roach Ravager attack is, instead of trying to fight the army straight up, he just says, well, I'm just going to defend and give up my third base, but then I'm going to try to take out yours as well. And he only needed 1 medevac full of units to take out Nerchio's third base, which I think was pretty amazing. And so now it's pretty an economically even game, I should say. MMA doing the drop again. He's going to be dropping at the third base, whereas he defends his own third base. This is pretty annoying. MMA is building a sensor tower, but it's not up in time. Not going to cancel it. Not a big deal. So while Nerchio is pushing here, he is doing like a decent damage to the structures. Gets a barracks, maybe? No. Nerchio is kind of just A-moving all over the place. Okay, he does get a barracks, it burns down, but he loses his entire army. And on the other side of the map, his third base is being denied again because, once again, all of his units were being rallied over, I think, over here, and then he switched it to over here when the drop came. But the reinforcements don't pop out nearly fast enough to be able to clean up this bioforce. And even if they do, the bioforce can just run away. So MMA, with the clearly superior strategy and game plan here in this game against Nerchio, and although Nerchio had a very strong timing attack, he didn't follow it up as well as MMA is, and as a result, MMA is now taking a supply lead against a Roach Ravager player for the first time this entire game. Now Nerchio is feeling the pressure, trying to get some more damage done, recklessly attacking into MMA's defensively sieged up army, not taking the trades that he wants. MMA scans that base to make sure Nerchio doesn't have a hidden third base anywhere, and just kind of confirming that this is Nerchio's entire army, and Nerchio's kind of he just threw his only advantage, his army, away. And MMA, as a result of 2 drops killing these bases, is in kind of the checkmate situation because he has the third base and Nerchio does not, and good game is called. So MMA's units all just filling multiple purposes. It's just really, really, really solid play. Now we see MMA versus Firecake. Firecake doing a slightly different Zerg style against MMA, but the same concepts that MMA has been doing the past 3 games still apply to this game. So MMA has not changed. The reason why I chose these 4 games is because they show 4 very different Zerg styles, but only 1 different Terran style. Sure, the Terran did different game plans, but ultimately, or I mean different build orders, but ultimately the Terran player has only been sticking to this one game plan of push, drop, defend, attack, whatever is happening. MMA is still making the same army, still getting 3 CCs, still just very, very solid fundamentals, very solid game plan, and this is what makes him so good, being able to just have this one game plan, and it's so well thought out that it makes it very difficult for other people to try to beat it. And this is what makes him a strong tournament player as well, because he has something to fall back on if something of his doesn't work or if his opponent gets ahead. And especially in a best of X series, like, all these players were able to watch MMA play, although the games didn't happen chronologically. Like, this is the last game. But, like, Firecake was able to watch MMA's play, and MMA didn't change anything, and Firecake still ended up losing 4-1. So what Firecake goes for here is a small adaptation in his play where he ends up going for Mutalisks to shut down the drops that MMA has been doing while he pushes out. And we'll see how that works for him in a little bit. MMA is going for this Hellbat push, kind of aggressive. I think it's to try to... not even sure what the reasoning for it is. I'm just saying it as I see it. It's an aggressive push. But what makes it really creative is the follow-up push, or the follow-up reaction afterwards. So this push basically did no damage. MMA traded his army for a couple roaches of Firecakes. On the other side of the map, Firecake was doing a run-by as well. Killed a bunch of units. There we go. So many SCVs. And MMA wasn't able to get the wall up in time as well. However, what MMA does afterwards as a follow-up is brilliant. So we see this Hellbat drop, 2 Hellbats and a medevac, just kind of hanging in there. I don't think they kill any drones actually, but they do cause some lost mining time. And this Liberator is going over. So MMA has very quickly set up a 2-pronged attack. So he is in the position to harass with the Liberator, drop with the Hellbats, and what Firecake is trying to do is he's trying to deny MMA's natural again and do a very aggressive attack, because he also did take this third base, and that's not a very good third base to take in these positions. So Firecake is going for this all-in. However, he doesn't have anything to actually deal with the Hellbats or the Liberator. So although he's going to be able to get some kills at the natural and to lift up the natural orbital command center, the Terran player is actually mining more because of all of this, just this double-pronged harassment that MMA was able to do as a follow-up. And now Firecake has this gigantic army, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. This is a bit overzealous by MMA to try to take this command center, but the reason why he takes it is he knows he's done a lot of damage. He's done a lot of damage to Firecake's economy, and he knows that if Firecake tries to deny this base, he's committing a lot of units to defending this. And sure, he's like trading out okay, kind of. He's trading out his entire army essentially for it, and so now he's either forced to continue making units to replenish those that he lost, or to drone up and not have an army. So this looks like a good trade for Firecake, but it was really a better trade for MMA because of what he gained from it as opposed to what Firecake gained for it. It's like Firecake's droning up now, but he doesn't have an army, and so he ends up having to make even more. He's making 4 roaches there, and he ended up having to make these lings as well to be safe against MMA's continued aggression. We see him being aggressive some more. Nice little pressure here. Coincidentally, doing this as a 1-pronged attack instead of like doing it as a 2-pronged attack didn't work nearly as well. But good job on Firecake to have those 3 Ravagers to deal with the Liberator. MMA's drop is still out here though, and so what this is doing, if we take a look at Firecake's army, it's pinning back Firecake's army so that he no longer can be aggressive. He's He's in a very defensive positioning to try to deal with this single drop of, what, five Marines and a medevac, so 7 supply, and Firecake's entire army is in defensive positioning to try to deal with it. So this allows MMA to safely take his 3rd base, or to land it at least, and to start utilizing it. And now we're in a position, economically speaking, MMA is in a good spot because it's 3 base versus 3 base, although MMA is not saturated yet. And MMA was building tanks because he wasn't sure if Firecake was going for Roach Ravager Ling or if he was going for Muta Ling. We see he's going for mutas over here. So I believe MMA will stop. No, actually the mutas are just a small thing, but he still ends up making the Roaches and Ravagers, I believe. So that's why MMA still continues to make tank production. Also, it's just good to have it to be safe as well. He's in a very defensive position, but the single dropship's out on the map, so every time MMA is being defensive, he still has some element of pressure on the other side of the map that is keeping Firecake on his toes at bay. His army is very far out of position from the other bases. It's kind of interesting. These Mutalisks not doing much damage. They get a little bit of harassment done. However, their primary goal really is to shut down these kinds of drops, or at least put a timer on it. I'm not sure Firecake realized, or Firecake just has no knowledge of this drop because it's been out of vision for such a long time. So that's why his Mutalisks are harassing, because as far as his knowledge goes, he doesn't know that this drop exists. Upon seeing the 4th base, he knows that it's not an all-in, and what's his face? Firecake is playing defensively, so then MMA goes in and drops, and as he drops right before the 2-2 timing. The 2-2 timing is almost there. He's starting to pick up his siege tanks. He's going to move out, hit his very traditional 2-2 timing that we've been seeing him do in all of these games, or most of these games so far. Now he's pushing across the map. Very, very formidable army. And did the medevac get cleaned up? It did, I believe. So this fight goes pretty poorly for MMA because his siege tanks are not positioned. Very sloppy fight from him overall. But he is able to, even though he doesn't micro this as well as he should, he's able to take a decent engagement because it's 1-1 versus 2-2. His 2-2 timing really shining over here and allowing him to deal with Firecake's army like relatively okay. And so that should have been a stomp if Firecake was at 2-2 upgrades. But even though MMA's army was like mostly out of position, he's still able to take a decent fight. He has a small bio portion on the map again. There we go. And we're in an interesting position where Firecake is up 54 supply. That's a lot of supply. So what this drop is here for, again, is MMA is being defensive over here, and the drop is going to be doing harassment. And the drop is able to trigger some semi-base trades when the entire army is out of position. Like, so Firecake took a good fight. His line of reasoning for attacking is, I took a good fight, I want to end the game now. Very, very, that's an okay way of thinking. That's very acceptable, very solid. MMA, on the other hand, he knows that's what Firecake wanted to do, or potentially could have done, so he has some pressure on the map. He's able to snipe the base, he's not able to snipe the base, but he does keep Firecake's army completely at home. It's like Firecake's entire army just went back. He's up 50 supply MMA has almost no units. Okay, let's actually just go back. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so like Firecake's army is poised, ready to attack. MMA has what? He has 1 tank. He has 16 Marines and a Marauder. That's all he has. Firecake has 3 Ravagers and, oh boy, that's like 30 Roaches right there. And what ends up happening, instead of killing MMA, he should have actually gone for this. Wrong move to back up. And this is the whole army that was over there. So like by the time that it gets here, he pulls up. It's okay. He could have even just sent like a small portion of his army back as well. He didn't have to send his entire army. But now, when he goes to attack again, drop still isn't cleaned up. Because Firecake lost all of his Mutalisks. He was over-harassing with them. And that is a word, over-harassment. There are specific times where you want to harass and where you don't want to harass. And MMA knows that exactly. Like this, if this was out a couple minutes earlier during the fight over here, he would have just lost. Now Firecake is going out on the other side of the map to try to attack MMA. MMA sees the army, he knows he can't handle it, he knows that it's Firecake's entire army, and he's counter-dropping again. Very, very good play by MMA, and we see him immediately evacuate his 3rd base as well, because he's like, well, this is Firecake's, this is your 4th base, man, so you take out my 3rd base, or like you deny it from mining, I deny your 4th base from mining, and we're still like relatively economically even. So very good move by MMA, knowing to give up that base, and then going for Firecake's base. So really, Firecake is now in a bad spot because he has no economy. And MMA is also 4 upgrades ahead. But just not having, or MMA's decision to give up that 3rd base, to take out Firecake's 4th base, and to just wait is what makes him a very, very good player. And it's going to be sad to see him retire, but I guess this is kind of like a tribute to honor MMA's skill and play style, and it will be forever remembered in esports. And maybe one day someone will trademark his style and bring it back to life on the big screen. Yeah. So bit of a long video, but I will like say when the different games are, and I'll give information so you can go skip to certain parts of it if you don't feel like watching the whole thing at once. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.